All right, welcome. Let's get it. Um, I don't know why I took so long to finally record this. I think I was just overthinking, overstressing it. Mind you, I don't know what I'm doing. So that's why I reminded myself, I'm doing this for fun. I'm just doing this, as a hobby. So I think when I tell myself that and I remind myself that, I think it kind of helps me, take the pressure off. Um, Again, the point of this podcast is for me to just have a space to, hanguear, chismear, and just talk my shit and just vent. This is episode one. So with that being said, the things that I'm gonna cover today are pretty simple. I'm gonna tell you who I am and where I come from. Two, I want to talk about how I genuinely believe that I had the coolest job as a high school, as a senior in high school. And uh, three things I would tell my younger self, knowing what I know now, based on the things that I've been through and all the experience that I've had. So tune in and let's just get straight into it. So this is episode one. So with episode one, we're gonna do one ding. Oh, yeah, that was a good one. If y'all didn't know, y'all could ding that bottle. Um, but yeah, and we are live, baby. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Christian Campos. I am originally from California, Southern California. I was born and raised in the San Fernando Valley. So shout out to all my Valley people. If you don't know where that's at, it's on the outskirts of LA, over the Hollywood Hills. So I was born and raised there. My family decided to move to Indiana when I was, I want to say 13, 14. It was right before I started middle school. I remember that. Um, I remember when they told me that we were going to move to Indiana. I honestly was confused because I didn't know where Indiana was on the map. Um, so that tells you everything. But I moved out here, during that time frame of like middle schoolish, and I went to high school here. Um, I graduated high school. I went to college, and I got my bachelor's degree in criminal justice, public safety. The reason why I went to college, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, because I've never been a fan of schools or the whole process, but I feel like I've been in schools my whole life. But the main reason why I went to college was mainly because of my parents. That's honestly why. I knew I could go to college and like get it done if I applied myself, but it wasn't something that I naturally wanted to do. Um, in high school, I knew if I applied myself, I'd be able to get good grades and whatnot. But I always felt like I was a wild child of the family where I was always curious to try new things and go do things, go see things. So school really never, called my attention. I just remember when I graduated high school, the biggest influence was my mom. She would ask me, well, if you don't go to college, what are you going to do? And I honestly didn't have an answer. I was 18, getting ready to graduate high school, and I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I was ambitious. I always knew I wanted, the nice things in life, the finer things in life. I wanted that. I knew that's what I wanted. Um, but I was under this belief that in order to achieve that, you had to have a good job or a good career. And at that time, I didn't have an answer to my mom, so I decided to go to college. So I enrolled, you know, and just the simple fact of enrolling and applying to college, that itself was a journey for me because I'm the oldest of three siblings, right? So it's myself, my sister, and my younger brother. Um, my parents came over here straight from Mexico, not knowing a single word of English. So, me applying to, an American college, university was unknown territory. I didn't have a big brother to kind of ask questions, get guidance on. You know, I just, I just have my parents, and my parents came from Mexico, so they had no clue. Um, so just applying within itself was honestly, intimidating. I was just hoping and praying I was doing things, the right way and not missing things. So I finally applied, I got accepted, and I started my college career. I feel like I didn't get the full college experience in the sense that I had to always be working. I had to always be grinding, So I went to college, full time, and I had a job, full time to be able to pay and stay up with, my college dues. So I didn't get the whole, room and board experience like a lot of my counterparts got to experience. Um, like for example, my brother right now, my man's getting the full college experience, and I am so 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 happy for him. Um, because I feel like that's how college should be experienced, but we're not all in the same, positions or situations to be able to experience that. And unfortunately, I wasn't. Um, I didn't know a whole lot going into the thing, so I went with what I knew. Um, I didn't know. Again, I didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I just know I wanted to do well. So when I was choosing a major, you know, I kind of thought about the things that I enjoyed, and I love traveling. So I said, you know what, let me see if I could, choose a field of study that has to do with traveling. So I ended up going into tourism and event management. So, and I remember I went to the first class, like the intro class, and I kid you not, there was like two dudes. It was like me and another dude, and just like the rest were just females. And then, they started teaching the class, and I'm just like, yo, this is not for me. Um, so I was back to square one, man. I was confused again. I was like, man, I'm wasting semesters trying to figure out what I want to do in life. And I just didn't have a clue at that time. And I remember I was watching End of Watch. I don't know, like the cop movie, one of my favorite movies. I remember I was watching End of Watch, and I was super into the movie. And I remember this one scene where I think his name's Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena were doing like they were searching a house, and then all of a sudden, like this agent shows up, and it turns out he's like a federal agent, and he was like above, them as police officers. So I thought that was like super, like I thought that was like super badass, and they were, chasing cartels and whatnot, and I always thought that that was super interesting. So I decided to switch my major, switch my major up, and I went into criminal justice public safety, wanting to get into a three-letter agency. Um, Three-letter meaning like the FBI, the CIA, DHS, ATF, all those, big organizations. So that's what I ended up finishing my degree in. And I remember it was my senior year, and we had a career fair, and we had an FBI agent on campus. And I asked him, what do I got to do to get into the agency? And he said, well, you got the degree. He was like, now you need, professional experience. And he was telling me, all the higher ups prefer military and law enforcement experience. At that time, the law enforcement, police officers in general, it was going like the political climate was hot. That's when a bunch of the police killings were going down and whatnot. So I stayed away from law enforcement, so I decided to join the military. So I joined the military, and I could probably do a whole episode about the military within itself to give you guys like a full insight on my experience with that. But I joined the military, and I remember telling the recruiters that I wanted a position that would give me a top security clearance with the least amount of time in deployment time, and I ended up getting a submarine position. So I joined the Navy. I was part of submarine teams, and I did that for 4.5 years. And then being in the military quickly made me realize that I didn't want to work for the government. So again, back to square one, not knowing what I wanted to do. And it's just like at this point, I'm like in my mid 20s. And I'm like, I've invested all this time and effort into wanting to do something. And it turns out it's not what I want to do. And that's why, like, I tell folks now, like, make sure what you're trying to do is something you're actually going to enjoy, because most of the time, a lot of people go to college thinking that they want to do a certain degree or a certain job, um, just because on paper it looks good and it pays good. And then come to find out, I've had, friends, colleagues start doing a job and they hate it, man. They hate it. They no longer enjoy it. Also, I tell people that go to college, man, like really think about what you want to do because it's super important. But anyway, so it's like I'm in my mid 20s. I'm done with college. I'm done with the military, and I'm back to square one with not knowing what I actually want to do in life. Um, so that within itself was probably like a big mental battle that I dealt with for a long time. And I think it goes back to the stress that I used to place on myself on wanting to have things figured out or have things figured out, based upon where I was in life with like my age. So I remember I was on a deployment, and I took some books on that deployment, and one of the books was Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I remember reading that book, and that's the book that honestly got me involved into real estate. So I finished reading that book, and I told myself, you know what, I'm locked in because at the end of the day, that's what's gonna give me, financial and time freedom, and that's honestly what I was after. I think the ambition was that I wanted to do things on my own time and to get paid, a decent amount. So, I got out of the military, I came back home, and sub- I just got involved into the real estate game, man. Um, Came back, I became a loan officer. I became a loan officer because I wanted to learn how banks work. And once I figured out how banks work, I started using it to my benefit. I networked with a lot of realtors, which has been super helpful
All
in
right.
my investment. So now we're gonna go over why I think I had the coolest job in high school. So my junior year of high school, I spent it out in California. And in California, as soon as the weekend rolled around, folks would get all these forwarded texts. It was just like a long chain of forwarding this text message, and it had the details to the parties and the functions out there. So you knew every weekend, there was a bunch of parties, ready to go. And mind you, it's California, so the parties out there were off the chain. And so that was my experience out there. So senior year of high school comes by, and I'm back in Indiana. And I remember getting invited to a party out here, and my mindset is still in Cali, so I'm just like, oh yeah, it's about to be a dope function. So I remember going. I remember going to the party, and it was a bonfire, and it was just people just hanging out around the bonfire, and that was the party. So I was disappointed, because I just came from Cali, where the functions and the parties were up here, and then I come back over here and the party's a bonfire. So me being in this, you know, party mode, I decided and I remember telling my friends, I'm like, you know what? I don't think that was a party. I'm gonna show you guys a real party. So I asked my parents if I could throw, a party at their house. And, my parents, being lenient with me, they're like, yeah, it's fine. But you could only use the backyard and the garage if you want to. And I was like, bet, that's all I need. So me being me, I set up speakers in the garage. I set up black lights in the garage. I set up a fog machine in the garage. And then the backyard is just, free game. So when people start coming over, they see, how the setup is. And as a high schooler, you're just like, boy, this shit's dope. So I remember that party being really, really cool because, most of my friends from high school, everybody was out there. People, they told folks and then they told folks. So it turned out to be a pretty big party. Um, we ended up getting a noise complaint, and I remember everybody was scared, and people just started running through my neighborhood, just scattering. You know, cops simply said, "Hey, keep the music down, keep the noise down," and that was it. And that was on a weekend. So come Monday, my party was just like the talk of the town. So then people started asking me, when are you gonna throw another one? And I already knew my parents. I was like, there's no way in hell they're gonna let me throw another party. So I started telling people, I'm like, hey, I'd love to throw another one, but my parents aren't about to let me throw, another party at their house. So then I can't remember who it was, but I remember this kid comes up to me. He's like, hey, my parents are out of town. He's like, you're welcome to throw the party at my parents' place. And I'm like, oh, word? And he was like, yeah. And I was just like, all right. So me being like entrepreneurial and ambitious, I ended up agreeing to throw the party, like hosting the party at his place. But what I did this time is I went to Party City and I bought a pack or a roll of wristbands. And at that time, Facebook had just launched like their events feature where you could like make an event and send invites. So what I did is I made an event and I invited, all the people from my high school. And I said, hey, I'm throwing a party this weekend. If you want to go, you have to buy a wristband for me. You buy a wristband for me, you'll get access to the party. And I remember I sent the invites out, and then everybody started talking. And at that time, I was charging people $5 to get into the party. And I remember people would complain, and yeah, everybody would complain about the price, but eventually people would pay. So all throughout high school, all throughout the week leading up to the party, people would find me in the hallways or at lunch or after school or before school, and they would buy a wristband from me, to be able to go to the party. So come the weekend, Friday night, Saturday night, um, I went to the kid's house and I did the same setup: music, fog machines, black lights, just the whole setup, to play water pong, all kinds of like cool stuff. And I remember the day of the party, people just start rolling in, and I had all my friends would help me, organize and set up. So I had people at the door, people checking around, making sure everything's good. And I remember that first night, you know, or I had a rule. I'm like, if you don't have a wristband, you can't get in unless you pay double the price, which was, $10, $5. Sometimes we would charge $5 or $10, whatever. And I remember that first event, after like I paid, the friends that helped me, I ended up walking out with $500 in one night. And as a high schooler, to earn $500, in one night to basically party was just like mind blowing. So from then on, I kept doing that, and people would hit me up and say, "Hey, bro, my parents are out of town this week, and you could throw a party at my place." And that's what I did. I was literally getting paid to party in high school with all my friends and whatnot. And I remember we had everybody, at those high school parties. And the thing about it for me, it wasn't like the typical movies where I was just gonna invite all the cool kids or all the popular kids. That wasn't my approach. I said, hey, if anybody wants to go to my parties, all you have to do is pay the $5. And people were paying the $5. Of course, I had a lot of people that would complain about it, but people were paying the $5. It got so crazy. I remember the Halloween party was probably one of the wildest parties. Um, I remember that Halloween party. We charged $10 um, to get in, and it's like you had to have a costume. And I specifically remember that party just because like the house where it was at, they had a big front yard. And shout out my homie, shout out my homie Nor. My man was out there like damn near valeting and directing traffic on how to tightly organize all the vehicles to be parked. My man was watching the door, and it came to a point where he was telling people, the people that didn't show up with a costume, he was telling them it's $20 to get in, and the people still paid for it. And it was just crazy because like it was a wild, wild party to say the least. And there were so many people there that I remember my homie told me that the floorboards had caved in, like they literally like sunk, like they broke. Like there was so much weight. There were so many people that the hallway just caved in. I was just like, shit. And that one was crazy. And then I think the other crazy one was this mansion party. So we got access to this big old house over on the southeast side of Indiana. And it was a big house because the house had a 3-car garage. It had a lake in the front. And I think it had like a pool in the back. We didn't use the pool, but I remember that at this point, I had a live DJ at the party, so I was paying one of my cousins to DJ for me at these parties. So we had like a full setup and everything. And I remember this party was also crazy because this is when people from other townships started coming to my parties because they would hear about them. And it got to the point where like we packed, or we had a lot of people at this mansion party. And the cool like the reason why it sticks to me is, one, it's a mansion, and two, since I had a 3-car garage, like I parked my car in there, my cousins parked their car in there for his equipment for the DJ, and I think another friend parked their equipment there. But I remember towards the end of the party, this huge fight just broke out in the kitchen. And I just remember telling all my people, I'm like, yo, grab your equipment and let's go. And I remember we were like grabbing all our stuff, putting it in the car, and then we started opening the garages, because it was a 3-car garage, and I don't know why this kind of gave me like Fast and the Furious type vibes, where we opened up the garages, hopped in our cars, and we drove off. And then like I remember looking back at my rear view mirror, like driving off, and I could just see like cop cars just coming in towards towards the towards the location, and I look back and I remember that, easily on a party night, I was easily making, anywhere between $500 to $1,000 from these parties. So, in my humble opinion, I think I had the dopest high school job like ever. So, the last part of this episode would be, what are three things I would tell myself knowing what I know now? And I think, what I'm about to share could help people that are, I don't know, in their early 20s. Shoot, it could possibly even help you right now. Um, but one of the first things I would, go back and tell myself would be to relax. The reason I say that is when I was younger, I used to stress myself out a lot about having, certain things accomplished by a certain age. And it was something that would just like always be in the back of my head. And I'll give you an example. Kind of like I would try to follow this timeline, right? Where I was just like, by the time I'm this age, I want to accomplish this. By the time I'm that age, I want to have this already. Whether that be, buying a house, buying a car, being married, having kids, etc., etc., etc. And what I've, come to realize is that here in the States, it seems like we live, and this could this could be personally just me, but I feel like as a society here in the States, we tend to live or follow this imaginary timeline that society has, painted for us, if you will. And the imaginary timeline tends to go along the lines of, going to school, going to college, getting a good job, finding your partner, getting married, having kids, buying a house, so on and so forth. And I feel like when I was younger, I used to stress out all the time, trying to keep up with this timeline. And I would, beat myself up and be like, man, I'm this age. I should have had this by now. I should have had that by now. And it's just like it came to a point where it would rob, my peace. And now that I look back, I'm just like, for what? For who? Social media is a really good tool in the sense that you can easily compare your life to others, you know? And when you sit there and you see what other people are doing and what they're accomplishing, I feel like it has a negative impact on you where you're just like, well, everybody's doing this, everybody's buying a house, everybody's having kids, everybody's getting married. And then it kind of feels like you're getting left behind in certain milestones that, you should be completing. And looking back and now that I, understand things slightly better is just you have to remind yourself that you're running your own race. Everybody's race is different. You don't know everybody's situation, background, history, what have you. But I would highly, encourage to let that imaginary timeline go. And that's not to say, don't have your stuff together and work towards your goals, because by all means. But what I'm saying is, don't stress yourself out. Don't beat yourself up, uh, thinking that you need to have it done by a certain age. No one's gonna come over here, knock on your door and be like, "Hey, you haven't bought your house. What are you doing?" You obviously know, the goals that you want to accomplish and the mental notes that you keep of things that you want to do in your life, but you you can't allow it to just, rob you of your peace or stress you out, because I used to allow that to happen a lot. And now that I look back, I'm just like, bruh, you don't owe anybody an explanation. No one's keeping track, waiting for you to, accomplish certain things. Just run your own race. You know, Again, I truly believe that's an imaginary timeline that we all have in belief that we need to have certain things done by a certain age. And the more you try to, follow this imaginary timeline, the more you're going to stress yourself out, So let that imaginary timeline go. Focus on what you want to accomplish and just run your own race, you know? Um, the second thing I would tell myself would be take advice from folks who have what you want. And I am a deep believer in this, because there were certain times where I would, really take people's advice into consideration, whether they were my elders or what have you. But something that I quickly started, paying attention to or realizing was that you need to take advice from the people that have what you want. You cannot take advice from folks that don't have what you want. That's just like, to me, that's stupid. It's not logical. You know, I'm not gonna take financial advice from my homies that don't have their finances together. I'm not gonna take relationship advice from the homie who's single and doesn't have a long lasting committed relationship. It's just the same way you wouldn't take, fitness advice from, the overweight person or the unhealthy person. And and sometimes, those people that are giving you this advice could very much so be your peers and even your parents. And something that always stuck with me was that my dad always told me that, whatever he did in life, it had got him to that point. You know, it was now on me to try to do better than him. So if I were to take my dad's advice on everything he knew about life, it would only get me to where he got to, right? So then I had to kind of expand my horizon and seek out, other mentors, other coaches that had or have what I want. And if I go back, I would tell them, I would try to reinforce that to my younger self to, always take it, take advice from the people that have what you want, you know, and it's that simple. Um, the last thing I would probably tell myself is it wouldn't be advice, but it would be much more. I would kind of like applaud myself. I don't know, give myself flowers because I think I always try to keep a balance with everything. So, obviously when you're younger in your early 20s, you want to go out, you want to turn up, you want to have fun because you don't want to miss out on life. But at the same time, I highly suggest and I always recommend that you keep a balance to that, And I always kind of had like this like work hard, play hard type mentality. And like, yes, I went out a lot and I, turned up and I did a whole bunch of stuff, but at the back of my mind, I always kept some sort of discipline to always be working towards a goal. And that's something that's super important. It's okay to go out and have your fun and whatnot and celebrate what you want to celebrate. But at the same time, there has to be an opposite to that. There still has to be some sort of discipline, some sort of, goal you're trying to achieve. Um, Just the other day, I saw there was a handful of people that were sharing this post, this quote, this meme that said, "Not going to the club isn't gonna magically make you successful." And everybody has their own perspective, but I will say that, you know, not going to the club, yeah, it may not magically make you successful, but it is something that will help you, be successful. And I speak that from actual experience. There was a point in time in my life for years I did not go out, and that was my time during the military where I didn't go out, on the weekends because I was just busy working. And I think that sacrifice of not going out during that period of time set me up, in a financial position where I was able, to then start on projects or invest in certain things. So just have a balance. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm not saying that you have to be a nun and not go out and whatnot, but keep a balance because the balance will help you. Um, but yeah, I those would be some of the things I would share with my younger self. Um, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I honestly didn't think I would even do this, but you know, I'm always challenging myself to step outside my comfort zone. So I hope you guys enjoyed the content. Um, I'm looking forward to recording more stuff and potentially start bringing on some guests. So if it's something that you'd be interested in, I have a cool idea how I'd like to incorporate other people. Um, but till next time, just remember, la vida es una. Thank you.